Hare Krishna, my dear friends. So, what is the Brahma-samhita? Very good question. It's amazing, mystical, unique book written in Sanskrit, has an unknown origin, has an unknown time of when it was written. It's 62 Sanskrit verses, very beautifully written. But before we get into the content of this book, I want to give a little bit of a history. So about 500 years ago, there was a great saint named Chaitanya. And Chaitanya was considered a hidden incarnation, a hidden manifestation of divinity, Krishna. Very few people knew that Chaitanya was Krishna. And so at some point, he took to the renounced order of life and traveled all through India, specifically going through South India. And he had sort of a mission, which was to go to the different temples, the ancient temples through India, and discuss with the scholars and the priests about the superiority of devotion, bhakti, as opposed to rituals. So he's traveling through, he's going to different temples, he's discussing about the importance of the Bhagavatam, which is a gigantic book on bhakti. And he gets to the Adikeshava temple, very old temple. And there he's discussing with the philosophers and the priests and such. And one of the philosophers quotes a verse that he never heard about before, which is from the Brahma-samhita. And so after their argument, he said, hey, that verse that you quoted, where did that come from? So they took Chaitanya into their library, ancient library, stacks of old manuscripts written on banana leaves. And they show him that they have one copy of one chapter of this ancient book called the Brahma-samhita, chapter 5. And Chaitanya was just enamored, 62 Sanskrit verses. He was just in tears on how beautiful this book was. So he had it copied, and when he returned back to Puri, where all his friends and disciples were, he showed them this amazing book. It kind of went viral. Everybody had it copied, and it traveled all through India. It made it to Vrindavan. In Vrindavan, Jiva Goswami, who was a renunciate and who was an amazing scholar, took the book, the 62 verses, and he wrote commentary on each verse. And that maintained as the de facto Sanskrit commentary on the Brahma-samhita for hundreds of years. And then at the turn of the century, around 1900, Bhaktisiddhanda Thakur, who was a magistrate, a judge, he had a big family, he was a great devotee, he wrote a commentary in Bengali on Jiva Goswami's commentary on the Brahma-samhita. And then his son, Bhaktisiddhanda Saraswati here, he wrote a commentary in English on his father's commentary in Bengali, on the commentary that Jiva Goswami wrote 500 years back in Sanskrit on the Brahma-samhita. So, what I have here is that 1932 English commentary on the Brahma-samhita by Bhaktisiddhanda Saraswati. It's amazing. It's so packed full of beautiful information about Krishna. So, how this book is broken down is the first, let's say, third of the book is a full explanation of the spiritual universe, Goloka, where the heart of it is Krishna's abode, and what the residents look like, what the place looks like, what the actual abode looks like, a 1,000-petal lotus, and around it there's this beautiful place called Svetadweep. And in Svetadweep, there's many manifestations of Krishna, and it's very beautifully described. And then around that is Vaikuntha Loka, the spiritual universe, where Vishnu resides. And then in a very small section of it is the material universe, with full description of where Shiva came from, Durga, Parvati came from, what is Maya, who is Mahavishnu, and then within each one of the universes, Vishnu lies where Brahma comes from, his navel as a lotus. Very, very beautifully described. And then at some point, Brahma has revelation of the spiritual universe, and speaks another 30 so verses about Krishna, divinity, how beautiful divinity is, how to approach divinity, and so much ontology of Krishna. And then the last few verses are some instructions on how one can live in a life of bhakti. So just in 62 verses, this book really sums up 18,000 verses of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Now, Bhaktisiddhanta's English is very hard to understand. And so in the next verse, we'll get into how to study the book. But what I put together was let's say a version of Bhaktisiddhanta's translation where the wording that is difficult to understand is just redone in such a way that we can understand what is being said. This is essentially kind of like an English translation of Bhaktisiddhanta's English translation without losing its purpose and meaning. And so in the next video, I'll put together how we're going to study this book using this study guide. Okay, Hare Krishna.